Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you to this edition of the Economic Times Money Gurukul, where we bring financial well-being and emotional well-being sharply into focus, as we have in previous editions as well. Now, for many of us, when we talk of our goals, it often comes back to physical health, it often comes back to financial health. But how often do we realize that the two of these are interconnected? There's a focus on well being, be it in the emotional or the physical sense, and a desire to improve finances, money management comes out on top when it comes to making a change of lifestyle. Most of us probably have a good sense of what it takes to improve our physical health. And of course, there's a whole manner of approaches to that. We may be driven by competing in a big sporting event. We want to invest in a gym membership. You want to commit to weekly exercises with your friends, maybe have a bit of friendly competition, become better informed about our food choices, talk to experts in the fitness industry, and be guided from there. It's a lifelong experience. And it's no different when it comes to our financial health. And it's important to have goals to strive for and to seek expert advice for in that realm as well. So, how is your financial fitness? Are you standing tall and proud, or conversely, are you gasping for air with a big hill to climb as you see the end far off in sight? Research has repeatedly indicated that financial health and physical well being have a very strong correlation. In fact, a 2015 survey I remember reading, conducted by one of the largest banks in the US, revealed that 81% of correspondents found other goals to be much easier to achieve when their finances were in order. And 70% of these respondents stated that good financial health had a very positive impact on their physical health. So the two do have a very strong bond and symbiosis relationship. Alternatively, poor financial health can have a devastating ripple effect. Money worries are commonly related to stress, to anxiety, which may manifest in physical symptoms such as lack of sleep, such as increased blood pressure, such as heart problems, and so on. Mental health issues such as depression can also arise when financial fears are present. This will not only impact one person in a household, but all of their loved ones too. And it can possibly flow over into the workplace as well. Beyond the impact on physical health, our financial health touches on every aspect of our lives, such as attitudes, behaviors, our emotional stability. Our sense of worth is often linked to feeling safe and secure financially. So, as you embrace taking charge of your future and making your dreams a reality, it's time to consider the importance of striving for the podium finish, so to speak, when it comes to financial health. With so many great and well informed experts in the field, a helping hand is never far away for those who struggle with their finances and never quite feel on top of their money matters. And this is what brings us together today. We have a power packed panel of speakers, including the effervescent KS Rao, who's the Senior Vice President and Head, Investor Education and Distribution Development at Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC, to talk to us a bit about our financial health, our emotional well being, and the connection between the two. Accompanying him is Amit Trivedi, who we're pleased to see again. He's an author, speaker, blogger, and trainer. And joining them as well in conversation later on is Kavita Ranganathan, who's the Associate Professor at the TA Pai Management Institute. I'm sure all of you are waiting to hear from Mr. Rao, Mr. Trivedi, and Ms. Kavita as to how exactly you can improve your financial health, how you can improve your emotional well-being at the same time. So without further delay then, let's hand over proceedings to them and let's hear more from them. Mr. Rao, I believe you're on mute. One of the
Yeah, I'm very
small
sorry.
foibles of working in the tech world nowadays.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Karan, for this nice introduction to start the day. And always good to have you starting this. It's a Shubharamb. And good morning to all. Good morning, friends. And I welcome Dr. Kavita and Amit along with us on this team now to have a panel. It's glad to see many of you coming on time and starting at 11, truly taking an edge of getting something to know. And hopefully we do the justification on as Karan said, on financial well-being and emotional well-being. Before I invite Kavita, Dr. Kavita and Amit, I would like to run through a quick snapshot on this, how what exactly it means, what is emotional well-being to create a context. Um, Amitji, is it slides are visible, right? Thank you so much. Yeah, I welcome you all and stay there. Give me a minute. What is Karan was talking about wellness. Not only just financial well-being, but emotional well-being. Wellness includes everything of it. It's a physical, financial, healthy, like living, or it could be anything. It's a state of physical and financial, emotional, and mental well-being. It is this wellness leading us to 1 minute. I think somebody is coming. And broadly, this well-being, I think survey which Karan was talking little while ago was, this is a survey done by Mr. Tom Rath and Jam, where he talks about the people, how this is interconnected, your financial well-being and emotional well-being. And each of these things, I think Gallup's done a study. In this study, which has been stored, whole wellness of an individual depends on the 5 aspects of well-being: your career well-being, your social well-being, your community well-being, and your financial well-being and emotional well-being at the bottom. And this survey says 60%, 66% of the people doing well at least in one, but only 7% collectively doing everything well. Probably this is the way where we can look at holistic well-being. And this is most important in the post-COVID world. And it's always, we look at the stock market cycles. Of course, today we have with us Dr. Kavita, who can talk about even the behaviors. I think I recall one of the quotes from Seth Kalraman. What he says is, stock market is the story of cycles of the human behavior that is responsible for overreaction in both directions. And my friend Amit, he talks more about these reactions and market volatility in one of his great books. It's a roller coaster ride. I think we can listen from both of them as we go forward, how these are interconnected and how we can go forward. And just to take it, these three on the financial well-being and emotional well-being, today we will put into 3 themes. One is how we can refresh our finances. And what is that? Emotions we need to reset. What is there is nothing called a right emotion and wrong emotion. How we can manage our emotions to manage our money. And last but not the least, how we can revisit our life goals. It is simply like, whenever your phone, whenever, Amit and me, we were doing sessions, we always look at our system gets hanged. Then what we do is we restart our system, like similar to your mobile, you switch off it. Then once you restart, you are refreshing everything. I think COVID has made us to restart everything. And it's a time for us to refresh so that you are having only what is needed. What is unwanted, I can remove it off. And reset is, these are the emotions which are needed for this time, and where I should not emotions taking over me, rather I take over my emotions. And last but not the least is my life goals. How are those life goals today? Is that important? For example, 6 months or 8 months before, global travel was one of the goals which I have. Probably I can just forego, and I don't even think for the next 2 years on that travel. At the most, I will have a domestic travel. Probably we love to drive down to Manipal, where Dr. Kavita stays. It's a wonderful place to be in. And it is then this financial wellness is nothing but a state of healthy living. This state of healthy living, how? One is, how I can, lack of financial planning always creates the stress for us. And it is proved by studies. It's like, even the mood changes comes because of the, if you are not managing your finances, and it leads to the lower productivity. It impacts the relations. I was talking to a couple of HR friends. They said the financial wellness even enhances the productivity of an individual employee. That's where everyone need to ensure that the financial planning is the first one the moment we join into the corporate world. Let us look at how we can have a holistic approach for these things. And financial wellness is nothing but there is a goal which is to achieve the financial goal, and it's a state of healthy living. It is not exactly about the money. It is all holistic approach to your way of living. And it's a quality of your life, how you are. It is financial wellness is not measured by the wealth you are holding, but it is measured by the quality of life and you are living it. And how you do this is you can take a better financial choices through right knowledge and the planning. That is what E.T. Edge and Aditya Birla together doing on this Money Gurukul month after month with many of the speakers who are coming from varied subjects, and all that needs to give you the financial well-being. And of course, that leads to physical, mental, and emotional well-being. This we discussed last time. Some of you were there in the last session. 2019 and 2020, only one thing has changed. In 2019, your child is going to the school. They said your child's phone, if you have given by chance a phone, it would have been confiscated and mentioned in the school, mobiles are not allowed in the school. But now you have to give a mobile to your child, and you have to, he or she has to learn entire things only through the mobile. Means, rules of the game, of the way we living, the way we make our old day go on, and the way we manage our finances has undergone change. Let us see what are the things we can refresh our finances. How do we refresh? I think this is an IPL time, and this IPL itself has, there is a game changer. If somebody is in Mumbai or somebody is in Bangalore, if RCB suddenly started winning, I would have been in the stadium, screamed and danced. Today, I mean, poor Virat Kohli has to play in Dubai. In spite of his winning shots, he will not have a crowd which accolates and which appreciates them. Means, they need to learn the game irrespective of the crowd. And it's like, they need to take a fresh guard. And for us in our life, there is a job losses, there are pay cuts, there is a reduction in income, there is a change in lifestyle. A year ago, I have taken 180 flights in a year. Now I am already 180 days at home, not even going beyond 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers outside my home. And there is a change in lifestyle, there is a health concerns. And this, Amit ji and me, we nicely kind one word. IPL comes once in a year at one point of the time, but we always work with a mission of other IPL, that is Investors Prosperity League. We ensure all of our investors how they can become wealthy, and this is all the taking the refreshing. And when you refresh, there are 4 buckets. You just look at your balance sheet, what kind of income you had a year ago, and it's not exactly your form 26. Most of the employees look at form 69, my income, but all your income put together. And how is your expense side? Some of us, the income would have reduced, but at the same time, even expenses have reduced. Then what are your assets? What are your liabilities? How you can balance it? Probably we will have a detailed session on your financial planning. And the last session on personal finance, Amit was talking about how you need to ensure your contingency fund. That is that your liquidity available to you, and ensuring you paid all your insurance. And if something happens, at least, there is something to take care, and re-looking at your goals. How we can, this is what in the financial well-being we learn. And when it comes to the emotions and behavioral finance, we will have a series of questions to Dr. Kavita who can guide us how this emotional well-being. Most of us, we would have learned IQ, EQ. Nowadays, people talk about SQ, like, it's the spiritual quotient. Probably all that is leading to the wealth quotient. How those wealth quotient can become. And I think Karan was talking earlier, your well-being includes mental, psychological, social, emotional, and spiritual. And what are the things we need to reset? Right now, there could be an anxiety. Right now, there could be a fear. Right now, there could be worry. And it's all that, there is something nowadays, the most of the, like I was reading one of the Harvard studies, one book on, it's living in the current moment. It's how you can, the being in the moment, which is all our emotions are battle between the present self and future self. The anxiety is coming because Corona got an end, does not got any end date. Now, how long it has to go? And most of the jobs are not recreated. And 50%, 60% of us are working from home. Will continue, or what will change? There will be a disruption. And it's always, whether even in the investing in the stock market, it's always present self and future self. How we need to, it's currently currently you are in the moment. What is that you need to do? And this emotional well-being is, I think, current crisis, which was unprecedented and unforeseen. And this crisis of magnitude, it reduces our ability to adapt to the new normal. We talk about the new normal, but it is not easy for adapting to the new normal. And managing these emotions is the most important thing. And in fact, we were running series of workshops along with Amit way back. We said need of the hour is HOUR, hour itself. That need of the hour for all of us is to have a hope for the tomorrow better. And it's a being in optimism, of course, not to missing the understanding of exactly what's happening. And you should have a resilience. Probably we would have fall back in the last 1 year. Even some of us are, it would have impacted very badly. How we can bounce back and survive. And the last one is, I think, it is a gratitude for whatever we have today. In fact, we are very grateful. We are all talking to you through this mode. Even in the lockdown, we could reach. At Aditya Birla, I was just looking at as of yesterday, we have done little over 750 webinars during this lockdown. Entire team as across the country they are involved. Means, it is God is kind to us thanks to the technology like Zoom or Skype, and we are reaching out. and we could do that. And how is this emotional response is coming in? As a like I do coaching in my internal teams, like it's at Aditya Birla Group. There we always look at in the coaching when we are managing the emotions of the people, when we need to guide the people on emotions, we use this acronym called SAME. When somebody comes to us, situation, aspect, meaning, and emotional response. What is causing this emotion? For example, currently, if there is an anxiety could be because of your job, anxiety because of the market, anxiety could be because of investments. What is causing your emotion, and what aspects of this emotion you are focusing more on, and emotional response you need to rightly have. Probably we will have a conversations around this, how we can do. There is a study which says there were roughly around 3,600 emotions. But predominantly when we are investing or in the financial world, we have five emotions which play very vital. It's the fear, hope, greed, overconfidence, and regret. And sometimes fear, like, we have like the way people are coming when index is at high, when market is high, people will always come, they jump in because reading this morning's Economic Times, if there is something very positive, I will just go back and see tomorrow I want to capture. There is a FOMO, or like fear of missing out. And sometimes there is a greed in us. How we can balance these emotions, we can look forward to. And the last one is to how we can restart our financial goals. This restarting the financial goals, now it's the unlock and we are moving out, we are working in. And what is that we need to do? Life is not the same, but how we can unlock and how we can unleash. What are your important goals? Don't go by every goal. Earlier, if I am going to a financial planner, the last thing first I will do is how is my retirement looks at. But right now, if I go to my financial planner, what I need to look at is next 1 year, next 2 years, how I can look at. Do I have my contingency fund? Do I have enough to pay my premiums? Do I have enough to pay my EMIs? Then the second one comes like, our children education. Then comes your house, then comes your retirement. Means, order of the goals would have undergone some change, how you can look at. Last but not the least, your top priorities. Take care of your health. That is the most important part of it. And take care of wealth. That is the second best part that I think we are going to talk about. And the crucial thing to manage our emotions always, it is not the Facebook friends I'm talking about. It is the real friends and your family and your relationships, either at a workplace or other place, what kind of cordial positive relations you have. All that leads to happiness inside. At ABC, at Aditya Birla Capital, I always keep telling my colleagues, ABC for me is ABC, that is always be cheerful. There could be a problem, but if I'm got deep into the problem, I will never address the problem. When I am calm and I can address that problem, when I can take it in a very different side. And most of the times we look at return on investments, but today we need to look at on return on life goals. Let us have a very holistic perspective, how the life goals we can do, whether it's an investing, whether it's an insurance planning, or whether it is a debt or asset protection, how you can do your life planning. And it's a time for us to relook. Nothing, I think this is 2020, we would have lost fully, but our vision for 2021 could be redesigning our future. The future is far better than what we had in 2019. We always call it's a corona, it's a 2020 version 1 of us, and post corona it's a version 1.2, 2.0 of us. It is like, it's a, what is that we can do, look at. And we can look at holistically our wheel of life, not just finance. Today, since we are talking emotional well-being, if you have 8 quadrants in life, what are your expectations in this wheel of life? What is impacted? Corona would have impacted us on the finance. Corona would have impacted on to some extent our health, but corona would have affected on the work. Other areas still life is good. How we can look at and balance it very well, and what kind of competencies we can look at. And then it is a time for us to declutter some things which are required, something which are not required. End of it, your financial well-being is what is that your purpose for which you are working, and what is your life purpose, and how you reach to the financial freedom which we spoke last session we were here. And it is for us time to take stock of your finances. That is, you are refreshing your finance and resetting your emotions, and like, start with a positive mental attitude. And last is your life goals. Live the life of your choice to put the goals. With this, I'll stop here, and I can invite the eminent panel, Dr. Kavitha, who is an associate professor in TFI Institute of Management, and she comes with an amazing experience on understanding the behavioral finance. And with me, I have Amit, who is my good friend, who is an author, coach, speaker, and everything. All in all, it's all rounder in the financial services. And with both of them, we will have series of questions. And before I start questions, Amit ji, I'll start with you. What is, in your opinion, financial well-being is? Sir, you're on mute.
Thank you, sir. So wonderful presentation, and thank you being here on this platform again. Now, what exactly financial well-being is? In one of your slides you covered. I'll just rephrase it. Eventually, well-being is related to living the life of one's choice. And in order to live the life of one's choice, one needs money. So if I have enough money, which allows me to live the life of my choice, that would lead to my well-being. And this well-being would eventually impact various other aspects of my life. For example, if I am stressed about money, then the chances are quite high that my relationships may suffer. It is quite possible that my mental health may suffer, and in the event, my physical health also may suffer. So, a lot of times, the financial stress is the starting point, and to that extent, my well-being is linked to my ability to see that there is enough to take care of my requirements. Now, for that, one thing that is required to be done is to understand what is enough. And that enough is different for each individual and each family.
Thank you so much, Amit. I think the moment you said enough, I was remembering a book written by the Vanguard chief, where he gives a narrative, when the hedge fund manager goes to the party and what is the enough, that thing, that's a phenomenal to look at. And looking at that enough, I'll go back to Kavita ji. Kavita ji, when can we say enough? What is that emotion of inside us make us that enough to say, yeah, I am full, it's and what is an emotional well-being in your context in relation to the behavioral finance?
Okay, so thank you so much for this wonderful initiative. I think it's great on part of ET Aditya Birla Group, and I know Rao sir and Amit sir have been doing these kind of seminars for a really long time, and I'm happy to be part of it, and happy that this whole conversation of why emotions are important in our financial wellness is also kind of being discussed here. So let's look at it, kind of like just take a step back and forget finance for a moment, and let's just look at emotions, right? So we are all human beings, and imagine if you were to live a day without emotions. Would you be able to make decisions the way you do? Right? So without emotions, we will be reduced to, say a bunch of algorithms, or, maybe people like, perhaps we will be defined as robots, and I mean, life would be like just no fun, right? So in fact, emotions allow us to take actions, right? But it's one thing that if you go to a fundamental psychologist and ask the psychologist that are emotions different from decision making, the psychologist will say, I mean, emotions are an integral part of our decision making. Emotions actually allow us to, chase our passions. Emotions, in fact, if you look at stories of successful people, it is perhaps these emotions that has driven these successes, right? So emotions as such are not bad, and emotions, in fact, allow us to make decisions. Whether these decisions are good or bad is something which we need to discuss in a different context, right? So emotions are integral part of our decision making. Now, if we look at the field of finance, so let me just give you a background. Finance and economics conveniently at some point of time ignored emotions. Why they ignored? Because if you look at 1900s, economics wanted to be a science, and in that whole angle of being a science, they got encouraged by, they looked at probability, they looked at mathematics, these are the kind of fields that kind of encouraged economics, developing models around economics. So emotions which were not measurable kind of were ignored. right? But if you look at the stock market, imagine, would you have a bull run without an emotion? And many people make money in that bull run, right? So now this whole field of behavioral finance, which is kind of developing, has now we also have different kinds of techniques where we can measure emotions in the right manner, and we are able to document and say, yes, if there is this is an emotional response. Emotions are good, emotions are bad. When does emotions lead to exasperation, or there are positive emotions, negative emotions? All of these have kind of been well documented. So without emotions, there is no decisions. And I think emotions is an integral part of being, you know, financially secure. If you're not emotionally secure, you cannot have well-being. Forget financial well-being. And well-being means prosperity and happiness, right? So and happiness is one of the most important emotions that drives each one of us. So without emotions, I don't think you can be financially secure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kavita. It's like, I can't explain better on linking the emotional well-being and financial well-being and connecting the dots. I recall, since you are at a TAPI Institute of Management, this was the lecture given by Mohan Das Pai. And he said in one of the financial planning sessions, he said, don't put Excel sheet to every emotion. And emotions, like, if I go to a financial planner today, for every emotion will have an Excel sheet, then I can't accomplish anything, and I look life is very tough. And with that perspective, Amit, I'll come to you. I mean, I like, there are certain expenditure which is, for me, it's a joy. It's like, the travel luxury. It's like, I may be wasting my money, but the kind of experience which I create for it. But would you guide us, the audience? Is a single formula to achieve financial well-being, and or to path to improve our financial wellness? And you always says person comes before finance in personal finance. Like, is there is any path? Sir, you're on mute. Sir, you're on mute.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, you have to repeat again.
Sunil, accidentally I got muted, and then I could not unmute myself. Yeah, so as Kavita beautifully explained, emotions have a huge role to play in decision making, and especially financial decision making. So I think it was Richard Taylor or somebody who said that there is nothing called behavioral economics. Economics and behavioral are interlinked, interwoven. So you can't have economics without behaviors. Now, where does this emotion come in? And the emotions are personal. So like you were mentioning, is there a relation between Excel sheet and emotions? Well, Excel sheet is something which is highly structured, very well laid out, format of putting data and details. And emotions normally don't like to follow any structure. We get swayed periodically, and that's where sometimes, even in a similar situation, the made different way. And that's the role of emotion. So to that extent, it becomes an understanding of the person, in understanding of the person's frame of mind. And that's why the subject of personal finance is very, very personal. And as I repeatedly say, it is personal first and finance later. Yeah. So again, you are on mute now, sir. Rao sir, you are on mute.
Yeah. No, I got used to my webinar one. It will happen. I'm using this time. It is then controlling is. Let me it's a this financial well-being to the emotional well-being. Again, I switch the gear and ask Kavita on some questions. It's this is like from 2020 March to today, and everything has undergone change. Now, market is always an uncertainty, and we get too many queries. But most of the times I've seen investors in March, they want to exit. Now investors coming back in October, most of them want to come back. If I can see these SIP numbers in the mutual fund industry and how it goes on. And when it was down, then they want to exit. When it is up, they want to come here. And what is that emotion causing? But how they need to manage such emotions? What is the behavioral finance perspective to it?
Yes, so it's very interesting, this example that you give. And, there is scientific evidence that as human beings, we kind of chase our winners too much. And we basically, shy away from anything that is losing its charm, right? So this is the same thing that is happening in the stock market. So that you hear a lot about a stock, or you basically are very excited about the winning part of your portfolio. And what do? If you have not entered the stock and you've heard so much about the stock, you want to enter it when it's on a high. Or if your portfolio has a winning part, you are scared that the you might lose the winning part, and then you exit, right? So both this behavior means that if you are in it, you kind of become risk averse, right? And you want to exit your winning part. And if you're basically not in it, you want to keep chasing it, right? So that's why most people, what they do is, if they hear they're exuberant about a stock, they kind of keep chasing them. And stocks which have fallen down in price, maybe not in value, right? And they are worried about entering those stocks. So this means that people need to understand that there is a difference between value and price. And we kind of see both of this in the same manner, right? So something that has become extremely pricey means that it is not giving you the same value, right? So, and something which has fallen in price, that also doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. So we need to differentiate that, between value and price. And I think that is not very easy, right? And we need kind of experts to basically do that. And that's why we have fundamental analysts and, the different kinds of experts in the stock market who are able to differentiate between what is a value and what is a price. So one thing is we keep chasing, price instead of value, and then we overreact to, certain of these, kind of, when the stock goes up, goes down, we kind of have an emotional kind of response to it.
I think it's a very detailed answer. It is true, when markets are volatile, or we as an individuals, we become more volatile, and human behavior is very volatile. And with this, Amit, I can turn to you on your book again. When it comes, the term of the volatility comes, I always comes to you, because you say always market is a roller coaster and riding the roller coaster. And for investing, any one of us, volatility can never be an excuse, because stock markets are bound to be volatile.
Yeah.
And your behavior, you need to manage, what Dr. Kavita said on that. What is your understanding, during last 6 months, we behaved very differently, market behaved very differently. And learning from your roller coaster ride, what is that? It's like, history never repeats, people say, but human behavior is always repeats. What is your advice to take care of financial well-being in the current volatility and looking at things?
So first of all, sir, I'd just like to elaborate on a few things. Roller coaster. So there are two roller coasters that one needs to take care of. One roller coaster is in the markets. Second is in the mind. I can't control the roller coaster in the market. The only roller coaster that I can control is inside my mind. So can I at least acknowledge that I go through that roller coaster every now and then? Whatever happens in the external world, there is some turbulence going on inside always, at all points in time. Now, that's number one. Number two, it is the markets and not necessarily only stock markets. If we simply look at the interest rates and the changes which have, that we've seen over the years in interest rates have also been volatile. We've seen interest rates as high as 12%, and we've seen interest rates as low as 5%. So even the interest rates are volatile. And all these things happen because these are open markets, and open markets meaning where a very large number of people come and share their opinion And it is these opinions that drive the prices up or down. When a large number of people are positive, prices go up. When a large number of people are negative, prices go down. Now, look at the interest rates. When large number of people are positive, interest rates would go down. In other words, the prices of bonds are going up. So the prices are going up when large number of people are positive. And it happens across. So in riding the roller coaster also, there are different instruments which are covered: stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, and even tulip bulbs. And in each case, the emotions have driven the prices to sometimes stratospheric levels or sometimes to abysmally low levels. That's the part two. Now, that's where, if we look at what happens periodically, we'll see, and you very rightly said that history never repeats, but still, remembering Sir John Templeton's words, he said the four most dangerous words are, this time it's different. It's never different. So marketplaces have changed, instruments have changed, times have changed, geographies have changed, people have changed, regulations have changed, but the human mind has not changed. And it is that human mind which we need to take care of. From that point of view, if I look at what has happened in last 6 months, we saw and in stock market parlance, we saw a V-shaped recovery. There was a sudden fall. Nobody anticipated that fall. And then there was a sudden rise. Nobody anticipated that rise also. Look at the irony. 23rd March 2020, all India, we had 600 positive coronavirus cases, 600, and Sensex fell to 25,000 points. As of now, we've got more than 76 lakhs cases total, and Sensex has gone up to 40,000. So 600 to 76 lakhs, and Sensex went up from 25,000 to 40,000. How does one explain that? The reality is, we keep looking for explanation for these short-term movements where there are none. Everything that can be explained in the hindsight, in the stock markets or in financial markets largely, I mean, not just stock markets, in financial markets, post-mortem is extremely easy, diagnosis is extremely difficult. And post-mortem happens only after the patient is dead. Now, if we start understanding this and accepting this, then our perspective on the investments changes a lot. Or a lot of times, it is the refusal to accept the reality that causes stress and that takes us away from well-being.
Thanks, Amit. I think, accepting the present moment and accepting the reality. But when it comes investments, it's volatility, we feel we become more volatile with the volatility in the market. Absolutely. And we go on the opposite side. And sometimes Absolutely. We misunderstand investment risk versus volatility. I'll ask this question to Dr. Kavita. Now when we talk about investments, volatility, what is your understanding and what do you think about people's understanding about investment risks? Or the people are clearly evaluating this risk, or their behavior is coming in the path and presuming the risk in a wrong side and to take a right investment decisions?
Right. So thank you, Amitji. You really put it out very, very extremely nicely. Just to elaborate the kind of thing Amit was saying, before we go into investment risks, if we just look at this world of finance, right? I think it's a very complex world that we are living in. Imagine if a person goes to a shop and basically buys, say, a bunch of biscuits or a bunch of apples, right? There is immediate gratification, right? You buy biscuits, you buy apples, you eat them, you like the apples, you like the biscuits. Even for that matter, if you buy a very high involvement product, say you buy a television or you basically drive your BMW car, you have immediate gratification, right? And you have this feedback that's coming to you. Oh, I like the experience, I like the product. Now look at it. If you look at finance, if you make financial decisions, there is always delayed gratification. You make an investment today, you get the feedback of whether your decision has been according to your expectations or not, maybe after a really long time. So by the time the feedback comes to the individual and the individual learns, so the learning process when you make financial decisions is basically extremely delayed. So this kind of makes this whole financial decision making process, I would say, I know, risky, one, and second is also enjoyable, but at the same time, it's very, very complex compared to many other decisions that we make in our lives. It's, I think, similar to marriage, right? You kind of, it's the feedback that comes is only after marriage, right? So it's so kind of investment decisions that we make around risks, especially, is extremely complex. Now, let's go back a little more to, what you were saying, like, Mr. Rao, you were saying that the situation in March is very different from now. And like Amit basically added to it that in situation in March, we didn't know much about COVID. So there was a lot of uncertainty about COVID, and the kind of reactions that we were having towards these uncertain times were kind of questionable. Now, the COVID numbers have gone up. The statistics say that it is much more prevalent, but still we are fine. Why? Because we are able to tame this uncertainty, right? Whether it is in the environment or whether it is within us, we are able to tame it. This is the same thing with financial decisions. This difference between risk and uncertainty is important. The stock market yesterday is not the same as the stock market tomorrow. Not because the risks have changed, but because it is, fundamentally uncertain world, right? And what happens is when we make decisions in terms of uncertainty, right? Many times these decisions go haywire, and we kind of put it back on us and say, oh yeah, I mean, we are irrational, we have made mistakes. It's just that the environment is so incrementally uncertain. The financial environment is so incrementally uncertain compared to other environments that it seems that the kind of decisions which we make and the mistakes that we make, it just shows that it feels that it's blown out of proportion, right? So the first thing is, I think, to understand in a financial domain is risks and uncertainty has to be differentiated, and we need to understand that well. If I may take one more moment to go back to your question, Rao sir, that on investment risks, right? So now, if we assume that people understand risks and uncertainty well, the way the risks are also reported in the financial world is extremely complex. Open a mutual fund brochure, and we may have audience here, right? So these audience might be interested in investing in mutual fund. Open a mutual fund brochure. How many of us really understand what is a standard deviation? How many of us really understand what is Sharpe's ratio? And then we go on and we communicate using Sortino's ratio and all these complex jargons. These are really difficult things to understand, right? It's extremely well in the textbook where I come from. I take this textbook and teach in the class. It extremely works well, but in the real world, it's complex.
So just to add to this investment risk and the understanding of investment risk,
Yes.
Early March, and I shared this with Dr. Kavita during one of our telephonic conversations.
Yes.
In early March, I was, this was maybe 15, 20 days before the lockdown started. So what I saw was three young boys were going on a two-wheeler. They broke the red light signal. They were on the wrong side of the road, going at a very fast speed on Mumbai roads without helmets. Okay, so three boys on one two-wheeler, no helmets, driving very fast, wrong side, broke the signal, but all of them were wearing a mask each. What does that explain? Now, you are worried about a coronavirus, but you are not worried about meeting with an accident where the probability was extremely high at that point in time. The spread of coronavirus, it had yet not come in India. There was not a single positive case as of that date, but these boys were wearing a mask. So the contagious nature of this pandemic had yet to really arrive in India, but they were protecting themselves against that risk, but breaking the head was not a problem. I think this ties in very well with Kavita's explanation of uncertainty and risk. Somebody was certain about one's own driving skills. That's why not wearing a helmet was okay, but was highly uncertain about the epidemic. That's why mask was required.
That's fantastic analogy, Amit. I think very nicely put it. And then I can go back to Kavita only on this question once again.
So can I just add one more example to what, I'm sorry if this is not as per the plan, but can I just add one more example to what Amit sir was saying?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so another example is, so this is basically from the book by Gerd Gigerenzer. He has written this in his book called Risk Savvy. And one of the classic examples is around the 9/11. So when basically the 9/11 happened, so people became extremely scared of, taking flights, right? So the number of people who died apparently due to 9/11 was in the US was around 4,500 people. And people became extremely averse to taking flights, and many of them started taking roads, right? So they started traveling by road. And apparently, if you look at 2011, the number of road accidents in United States increased manifold. Why? Because most people who thought flying, was unsafe, riskier, because of this one extreme incident called 9/11, they took to roads, and they were simply more drivers, reckless drivers on roads, and that kind of led to more road accidents. So the whole assessment of risks was kind of misplaced, right? So we kind of also react to, extreme situations, like, or some things that has been discussed a lot in the media. And then suddenly our assessment of risk in those situations is so heightened, and our response is so misplaced, that we end up in another situation where the risks are even more higher.
Yeah.
That's really well put. And, nice anecdotes, nice analogy. But this I'll bring back to our emotional well-being of the topic. I mean, if I can look at why even the most knowledgeable investors do take these commit their mistakes while managing their finances and taking right financial decisions. Is there is analogy? Is there is anything on the behavioral finance you speak about it?
So is this to me?
Like, yeah, it is for you. Is the why even the knowledgeable investors will make mistakes? Like, they knew everything. Like, if you can see, if I can go back to the history of investors, some of the the person would have gone to the 3 cycles. He would have seen all the scams, but still, this time when the panic has come, he or she would have reacted in the same way they reacted earlier. What is that defines that?
Yeah, so there is actually scientific evidence around what you're saying. It's basically called overconfidence. So one of the research papers I know about, they simply did this survey. So they went to professional fund managers and they asked them, are you above average when it comes to predicting the stock market? And what would you imagine? 74% of them said that they were above average. And the rest, 26% said that they were exactly average. So nobody was willing to be below average. So, so this overconfidence is kind of reported to be one of the, major behavioral biases, which which hurts our health. And this has been reported amongst experts a lot. Why? It's obvious, right? Because experts are the ones who kind of, face successes and failures, and the chance of failure may be low, like, events like 9/11 or events like financial crisis, you see it happens once a while, right? These are rare events. So what happens is, when we keep seeing gains and gains and successes, we are kind of riding on those successes. So this kind of increases our exuberance, overconfidence, and then one day, boom, there is a financial crisis and all of us are, kind of washed out. So overconfidence is one of the most important behavioral biases that has been documented. In fact, this research paper goes ahead and says that because of overconfidence, traders and portfolio managers who are experts, right, they trade excessively. And if you trade excessively, it is going to hurt your wealth.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Kavita. And with that, Amit, I'll just come back to you on the financial well-being with all that narrative of overconfidence and getting there. In the current scenario, like, there is one way people say markets again come back to all-time high, but underlying economy is not at the same, the pre-COVID and post-COVID, I think highly vulnerable. And is that somebody is taking an investment in equity today or allocating higher money to the equity? Is it overconfidence biased, or which bias it is, or what is that asset allocation you suggest at this point of time?
So first of all, coming to the biases, I would say one of the biases that one can really see is a recency effect. In the recent past, we've seen a rebound. And because of that, it's easy to believe that every time the market has fallen, it has recovered very fast. So we are fine. I mean, even if there's a fall, it's a temporary blip and the market would come back, which is one of the biases that I can really attribute to. The second, and which is where the overconfidence comes in, and on this platform, I would like to really, caution everybody is that during the early phase of lockdown, reportedly, there have been a very large number of young investors who opened the demat account for the first time. Now, whatever be the reason for their action, but if somebody has opened the demat account for the first time to buy stocks, it's very clear that the person had not invested in stocks earlier because there was no demat account. After that, you've seen these stock prices going up. Now, this early success often is very, very poisonous. I'm using the very strong word called poisonous because in the early stage, if somebody has tested success, then the overconfidence that Kavita was mentioning, that builds up very fast. And if this success continues for some more time, when that overconfidence turns into arrogance, is not known to anybody. And then all the guards are down and we become reckless to some extent. Now, that's something that I would like to caution everybody against. Just go back and check. Now, if you made money in stock markets, very, very good. I mean, I'm very happy. But go and check whether the gains were on account of your hard work, your skills, or you simply were lucky. If you are lucky, then work on your framework all over again. But do that analysis very ruthlessly, very, very ruthlessly without attaching the emotions. Look at it as if you are assessing somebody else's performance and not your own performance. Otherwise, Kavita mentioned about those traders where 75% of them said they are above average. In fact, in driving, there is another research, which is slightly older research, where 91% or 93% of people claim that they are above average drivers. It was statistically impossible. Yeah. So this is the one thing that I would like to caution people against: recency bias coupled with overconfidence. Number two, what kind of asset allocation should one look at? Now, when it comes to asset allocation, let's face it, the first thing that you need to take care of, and I'm borrowing from the slide that you shared, sir, the first thing that you need to take care of is the short term. It's like a cricket match. Even if when you do score 500 runs, you to ensure that you don't lose wickets. If you lose wickets, then there are no runs. So that survival is very important. And where do you ensure survival in financial planning? Number one, have adequate contingency fund or emergency fund. What is adequate? Depending on your source of income, 3 months worth of expenses to up to 12 months worth of expenses should be in a liquid fund. It could be in a fixed deposit. Yeah, so that's number one. Number two is where insurance comes in. What insurance? Start with health insurance first and then life insurance. Health insurance comes before life insurance in terms of prioritization, simply because in the event of claim, in both the cases, in health insurance, there is one extra person. In case of life insurance, there is one less person. Number two, the expenses in case of health insurance are also higher. So to that extent, health insurance comes first. Third, the probability of more number of claims exists in case of health insurance. It does not exist in case of life insurance. So that's the prioritization. So insurance is number 2. Then take care of your immediate to short and medium term goals, and then look at the long term portfolio. And then comes the question of asset allocation. So all the short term and immediate term goals, the money has to be in liquid funds, fixed deposits, and similar short term instruments or short term vehicles like liquid mutual funds. The medium term investments better be in a debt mutual fund where you have the flexibility, better tax efficiency, and enough liquidity to withdraw money as and when the money is required, partly, fully, whatever. I mean, there are a lot of advantages of debt mutual funds. And then the long-term money can be invested depending on how much is your risk-taking ability. If you are reasonably aggressive, larger part of the money can be in equity mutual funds. If you are not so aggressive, then look at hybrid mutual funds. The aggressive hybrid. If you are conservative, then there are conservative hybrid funds. But you can't ignore equity mutual funds in that space. So that's how I would look at the asset allocation.
Thank you so much. It was such a detailed answer. Probably I'll come back after asking a question to Kavita on extension to that. And I also request audience, please put your questions on the chat box. Post this, on the next question, I think we'll be taking over a lot of questions from each one of you, from the participants. Feel free to get as many questions as you have. We would like to answer. Either it is in the financial well-being or emotional well-being. And with this, Kavita, I'll just come back to you. I mean, when Amit spoke about asset allocation and the current scenario of the markets, but what are some of the common mistakes that the investors commit during this period of time, this kind of high uncertainty, high volatile, and how they can avoid? What is that? What do you advise?
Okay, so some of the common mistakes, we have discussed. One is what is very well documented, which is overconfidence. Then what Amit sir said, recency bias. Then there is another very well documented bias, which is known as loss aversion. I wouldn't call it as a mistake, but again, this is a very natural response. As human beings, losses hurt us much more than equal-sized gains. So, then basically this whole system of regret and everything kind of kicks in, and then you kind of make, you are emotionally distressed, and then you make decisions accordingly, which might hurt your wealth, right? So the another very important documented bias is called as an anchoring bias. I think we do it every time. Like, imagine if you're entering a supermarket again, and you see this board that 2 dozens tomatoes, you basically get it for this price, right? I would imagine that many people will end up buying 2 dozen of tomatoes, whether they need it or not, right? So these kind of, you kind of keep anchoring to information that is presented to you. The same phenomena is documented in the financial market, especially in among IPOs. So there is this evidence that so basically when the IPO gets listed, the first day of listing, if you see, most IPOs end up in, depending upon whether it's in a hot cycle or a cold cycle, especially when it's in a hot cycle, these IPOs end up having a first day pop, right? So they are listing much higher than their offer price. And what do people do? And so there are different reasonings why IPOs get listed so high on the first day. One of the well-documented reasoning is that the offer price, the IPO is underpriced. That is why on the first day it's kind of listing high. But what happens is most people anchor to the first day price, and then the IPO kind of cools off over the periods, like say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, whatever, right? And because people have anchored to the first day pop, they are unwilling to sell their IPOs or spare their positions, even though they would be profitable when you compare it to the offer price, right? They are unwilling to let it go, right? So this is a kind of an anchoring bias, which is extremely well documented in behavioral finance. right? So there are different kinds of biases. So what do? I mean, till now, I think the field of behavioral finance was descriptive in the sense that it described people's behavior. So you open this, link or behavioralfinance.net, you will get around 500 different kinds of biases. But I think the important question that you asked is, well, okay, now that these biases have been documented, how do we take care of it, right? So we need a prescriptive approach to it. One of the prescriptive approach, according to me, is what you guys are doing, right? Financial literacy. And this financial literacy, the earlier it begins, the better. Introduce financial literacy in schools, make people comfortable to speak about finances on lunch tables, on dinner, with their children, everything, right? So one of this is, I think, a very powerful education tool, which is financial literacy. The other tool which has kind of become popular, like Amit was referring to Richard Thaler and his colleague Cass Sunstein from Harvard. So they have introduced what we call as nudges. Now, a very simple example of nudge is, imagine a cafeteria, a child goes to a cafeteria, there is food laid out over there. What you do is you put healthy food within the reach of the child, right? You keep unhealthy food also, like, different kinds of, say, fast food, but you make it very difficult for the child to reach out to those unhealthy food, which means you're not curbing the child's freedom. You are allowing the child to choose, but you are orchestrating the environment in such a way that the child goes and reaches out and grabs an apple or grabs something that is more healthy. So they tried this in the world of finance. So what they simply did in the US is you have this 401k retirement plans. Okay. So basically, when you get a job, you go to your HR and then you fill these 401k plans, which is kin to retirement plans that we have here. And there are number of 401k plans, and you have to choose. You have to actively choose and say that X amount of my salary goes into this retirement planning. What did people do? Because they had to make active decisions. People would never go to the HR and never fill these 401k plans, and the money would simply be lying in their checking account, right? So what the US government did was that they simply changed this form and they said that by default your money will be invested in certain, like equity market, certain plans. And if you didn't want the money to be invested in these default plans, you have to go to the HR department and check. So your checking became a default. Your retirement investment kind of took a default route. If you didn't want to invest in these specific plans, you had to make a more active decision. So your passive decision was that, invest in these kind of index funds, right? Now imagine if a person invests in index funds, and we all know equity pays over a long term. Who would come back and, after 20 years and basically say that, oh, I'm not happy with this much return, right? So it's always a better decision that your money is passive. Investing in equity in index fund is much better decision than your money, than a person procrastinating and keeping the money in the checking account, right? So this happened to be one of the most powerful, I would say, nudging behavior, which was very successful in finance. Of course, there are other examples in organ donation and, which are kind of uh, um, which are which a lot of arguments around then, whether it is right or wrong, whether the government has the authority to take decisions on part of the individual and all that blah blah blah. But I'm not getting there. But yeah, financial literacy is, I think, the first step, and second step is, yes, we could design some powerful nudges which would help people.
Just to add to Kavita's point of nudges, and this is my personal way of managing my own behavior. Okay, I'm not saying my own money, but a few years back when I quit the job, I was getting into a situation of getting that monthly check, which was a huge comfort, to getting into a situation where there were no monthly checks coming in, and the income was going to be uncertain. Now, income is uncertain, but the household expenses are not uncertain. They'll continue. Now, what do you do in such a case? And if I get emotionally disturbed because of not getting that check on monthly basis, then I can't focus on my work. So what I did was I put some money in a liquid mutual fund and set up a systematic withdrawal plan of a particular amount which was marginally higher than my monthly expenses. Every month, on the first or second of the month, I would get an SMS from the bank that your account is credited by so much amount. And the mind would calm down. Okay, this month is taken care of. Now, the moment this month is taken, and though I knew it was my own money which was coming back, nobody else was paying me. But still, getting that SMS from the bank was calming the nerves. So that was the nudge that I played on myself, knowing fully well. And if you, I mean, just imagine it was effective in spite of my knowledge. So these are the nudges that we can develop ourselves.
Excellent. So what Amit just now said is something that's it's kind of an extension to what Thaler and Kasserstein spoke about in their book Nudges, is self-nudging.
Self-nudging.
Right? So rather than being dependent on the environment, say a government or something else to design nudges for you, you should be able to design nudges for yourself, and which is kind of very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know your preference is best, right?
Absolutely, Kavita, and amazing, Amit. I think I'm sure Richard Thaler has to write the next volume. You can take your nudge practically on the side. It's a very, very apt and taking these nudges as well as it's the biases we can look at, Amit. This can be a last question before we take the audience questions. It's this 2020 has thrown so many challenges to us. And for every one of us, things have become heavier. And is that a nudge? What kind of nudge one has to give to stick to the financial goals? Or how you can help the people, whether they need to relook at their financial goals or they need to rework on it to ensure their financial well-being is in order?
So I think financial goal itself is a huge, and if I can borrow from what Kavita was mentioning, one of the biases, a financial goal can be a huge anchor. So while anchoring to something external, if I can put that anchor on my own financial goal, then I'm more likely to remain focused on what I want in life. So for that purpose, what Gaurav Mashruwala actually suggests this, that he says, with the whole family, you take a photograph, put it at the center of the page, and then around that photograph, write down all the family goals. And then stick that picture at a very prominent place in the house. And that works so beautifully well, because then after that, before taking any financial decision, go and look at that picture. So you are checking back that are your decisions in line with those goals or not. Having said that, once you've done that, the big nudge that you need to take care of is taking care of your short-term emotional turbulence. And that's where ensuring that there is enough provision for the short-term requirements is the second thing that I would suggest everybody. So let's come back to my own situation and what I did. 22nd March was the announcement by the Prime Minister for that Janta curfew, if I remember correctly. And 25th March onwards, the lockdown started. Now, when the lockdown starts, and the profession that I am in, and you both are aware, that prior to the lockdown, I was doing a lot of physical training programs, traveling all over the country. Now, in such a situation, when the lockdown is imposed, I can't travel. So what would happen to my profession? And if my profession cannot be continued, my cash flow gets impacted. So the first thing that I did was I redeemed some money and created a much larger contingency fund right there and then. So I had some money, because under normal circumstances, I thought that was enough. But these were abnormal circumstances. So what do? You create a larger buffer. And the moment I created that larger buffer, then once again, my roughly 8 to 9 months worth of expenses were taken care of. And when you got that much buffer, initially anyway, the lockdown was supposed to be for 3 weeks. So we assumed that 3 weeks can become 4 or 5 weeks, not more than that. We never imagined that it will go on for 7 months. But against the 3-week lockdown, I had provision for around 7 to 8 months. So the moment you do that, then all your other stuff can continue without any problems. The second thing that I would request everybody to do is, and something again to borrow from your presentation, while the income might have gone down, or you might fear that the income may go down, also check your expenses. Many of your expenses have also gone down. Now, here is a time to reset. Reset to the current forced spending situation. Prior to the lockdown, we had certain spending habits. Now
Yes.
those spending habits have changed. Can we reset to the present habits, or are we going to go back to the previous habits? Is a question that everybody needs to answer. If the expenses can continue to remain low, then a lower income is not that big a problem. But if the expenses are going to shoot up and the income has come down, then you need to again work out your finances all over again. But my sense is, if you look at your liquidity requirement and your income expense gap, then that short-term anxiety can be controlled and anchor on the goals, and largely that nudge should work.
Thank you so much, Amit. I think the nudges which you share and the anchoring biases, how you can put on a positive side, like, putting a family frame and putting those goals, that's a fabulous thing. I mean, Kavita is teaching on the emotional and behavioral biases, and you are practicing on those. Probably it's a mirroring what is happening. And if everyone starts, their contingency fund can be high. And if I am like, somebody's paid check is not coming in, how you can see that flow psychologically. Some of these are true takeaways, and it's comes with a wisdom, Amit, as always. Now I'll go back to the audience questions before I come. A last question to you at the end of audience question to you. And this is a question to you, Kavita. It's audience. This is an example which you gave about marriage. Mr. Sukumar Kumar is telling that we can control risk, which is compared to marriage, may not be true in emotional matters. Would you like to say something about it?
Sorry. So what is the question here?
Its question is like, it's not exactly a question. It's a comment you needed. It's we can control risk, which is compared to marriage, may not be true in emotional matters, but of course it is a different, people will have a different kind of experiences. We cannot say about it, but would you like to explain further on that?
Okay. Yeah. So yes, she is right that one can control risks. That's absolutely. But to control risks, one needs to understand risks, right? So let's leave the marriage part aside. It's, I think, a much more complex, and it would require a much more detailed, kind of conversation. So let's simply, if we take risks, right? So we need to understand risks. Just let me give an example. So suppose the weather department says that tomorrow there is a chance of, say, I live in Manipal, it kind of rains here as and when it likes. So the weather department says that there is a 5% chance of rain tomorrow. And if I were to throw this question to the audience, there is a 5% chance of rain tomorrow, how would we interpret that 5%? This is again coming from a well-documented survey. So it was done in Germany, in Berlin, and in New York, and people were asked, there's a 5% chance of rain, how would you interpret it? So some audience said that 5%, it means 5% of the region will rain. 5% of the times it will rain. There was one person who went ahead, a very funny answer, 5% of the clouds are rain-bearing clouds, and all of that. Why were these responses in such fashion? Simply because they were not able to interpret what is this 5%. They were not wrong in their responses, right? So it's important to give the reference group 5% of what? 5% of the time, 5% of the days, whatever, right? Many times when we communicate risks, so this whole idea, that risks, to understand risks is important. is also comes back on, like professionals like us and the regulators, the way we communicate risks. It should be in such a way that common investors are able to understand these risks, right? Open a mutual fund brochure, it says that, standard deviation is 20%. Means what? Right? So we need to communicate that, okay, standard deviation is 20%. A standard deviation has no meaning unless you look at the average. You have to, 20% of the average. So suppose the average is, say, you invest in a stock and you make, say, $1,000. It could be possible that your return would go to $80 or the return would go to $120, right? So these are simple ways of communicating risks, and that is kind of extremely important to make risks understandable.
Just
Thank
to
you
add
so
to
much.
just to add to what Kavita was saying, like beautifully explained that standard deviation has no meaning without talking about averages. The reverse is also equally true. Averages have no meaning without talking about the standard deviation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's,
Good,
and
good.
then a lot of times the averages are thrown at us without any reference to the standard deviation, and this is also equally important. Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
fantastic. In fact, Amit, I have gone through some of the one of the surveys Kavita did recently.
Yeah.
All these questions were well. I think these questions are very mind-boggling. I was struggling to answer some of the questions. I
True.
was like, I appreciate the standard deviation has become standard for us, and we always get deviated from the basic
So
fact.
actually, the bigger standard deviation, I mean, the bigger standard deviation, rather the standard deviation, which is a bigger problem, is that it is a standard practice to deviate from our own plans, be
Absolutely.
it financial plans or life plans.
Yeah.
That's a bigger problem.
Now,
Right.
adding to that, I will be asking you the next question.
Sir.
The question what you ended right now. It
Sir.
is like, this is a question from Mr. Rishabh Shah.
Huh.
He says, I temporarily stopped my SIPs and other long-term savings plans when the lockdown started, fearing the furlough and layoffs, thinking that I would have enough cash at my disposal. But now I feel I did a mistake. How do I tackle such situations? Anyone
Okay,
can, if
so
any one of you can answer.
okay, I'll take that because he is talking about 2020. I had a very similar situation in front of me in 2009. On one particular day, two friends called me. Okay, and I'm not an advisor, but being in this field, both friends called me, and both had the same question: should I continue my SIP or should I stop my SIP? And I had exactly opposite answer for both of them. I told one to continue the SIP. I told the other to stop the SIP. Okay, so Mr. Rishabh Shah, you don't really need to feel bad about it. And I'll explain why I gave that answer, because it is at that moment that you have to decide. And then in future, you can't regret, because if you just look at the context, then that was the absolute right decision at that point in time. Okay, so the first friend whom I said you stop is a freelancer with no regular income. And my question to this friend was, how does the business pipeline look? What do you see? And the answer was, it's very hazy. I don't know whether I'll get business in over next few months or not. Then my request to this person was, don't redeem your investments, but don't continue the SIPs. Accumulate liquidity. The other friend, she was working in an IT company, and her husband was working in another corporate, very senior executive. Both were earning handsomely, secured, safe, nice jobs. Both were at a very nice place, and both the companies were also doing very well. In her case, half of one person's salary, between the two of them, half of one person's salary was equal to the household expenses that they were incurring. So they were generating that much surplus. So even if one person's income stopped, the household finances would not be in a problem. In that case, I told that lady, please continue your SIP, you don't have to worry. Now, if you look at it in context, then both had different situations, and that's why both got different answers. So Mr. Rishabh Shah, you got to actually evaluate further. Were you emotionally overwhelmed and that's why you stopped your SIPs, and now you're once again feeling that market went up, and so you were not timing the market, you were only timing your own situation and your own mental state at that point in time. So you've not done a mistake according to me.
Thank you, Amit. And I request audience, you can keep typing your questions. And Amit, it was fantastic to address and Rishabh with the live examples. And now the next question I'll go to Kavita. It's a question from Komal Zindal. Please explain something about herd behavior.
Okay, so put it very simply, herd means there has to be a leader and there has to be a bunch of followers, right? So typical example in the financial market is the IPO market, where it's very well known that retail investors herd actions of institutional investors. So in the IPO market, if like many of you know that there's a bidding process, it is extremely live in India, which is that there is a huge amount of transparency in India when it comes to bidding of institutional investors. So retail investors can see the bids of institutional investors, and if there is an oversubscription, the IPO, the retail investors follow the institutional investors. So this is typically what we call as herding. Okay. So, but the problem also, herding is also considered as one of the behavioral biases. Now, when does it become a problem? It's basically following the masses, right? That is what is herding. The minute the M drops, and then you know what you're following, right? Then it becomes a problem. So you have to be aware of whom you're following. And that is, I think, critical. I mean, it's important to, herding could be good, could actually work as an excellent strategy, or herding could actually hurt you. But then you need to know who is the leader and whom you're following.
Yeah. Fabulous. I think, self-awareness and how do you decide is the most important one. Now, Amit, this question to you. This is a question coming from Neha Patel. Yeah. Although markets are coming back to normal, we still feel stressed about coming few months. How should we go about these in coming months?
Okay, so Nehaji, first of all, there are certain terms which we very regularly use. It's important to understand what do we mean by that. So, and I'm referring, in your question, I'm referring to the word normal. What is a normal market? If I understand in stock market parlance, a lot of people got very, very disturbed when the markets fell in March. From whatever Sensex 42,000 in January to 25,000 in March, and a lot of people were really disturbed. So I went back and checked the numbers. This was the 7th time since inception of Sensex that there was a 30% or bigger drop from the peak. 7th time. Now 7 times in 40 years is almost like once in every 6 years. So it is not a rare phenomenon. Once in 6 years is not. However, the gap between the previous episode and this episode was 12 years, more than a decade. Number two, the kind of ups and downs that we saw on a daily basis were extremely, extremely high in the month of March. Let me again share some numbers. From January 2010 to December 2019, over a 10-year period, there were roughly 2,500 days on which the stock markets worked, 2,500 days. Out of that, if I look at the daily closing value of Sensex, more than 4% change in either direction, up or down, more than 4% change happened only on 3 occasions, 3 out of 2,500. In March 2020, a more than 4% change occurred on 10 out of 21 working days. Now, that's very unsettling. For a decade, the volatility was absent from the market, and that tends to give us a sort of false security that markets have become safer, and suddenly the market demonstrated its own true behavior. So that's bound to happen. And why am I expanding on this is because that decade was abnormal. March 2020 was very normal. So the volatility that we are seeing in stock market is the very nature of stock markets. That's number one. Now, let's come to what you are referring to, that we are still stressed about the coming few months. So first of all, stock markets are not a place to invest your money for a few months. It's a place to invest your money for a few years and possibly few decades. So expand your time horizon, because in the stock markets, in the words of the Dean on Wall Street, Benjamin Graham, the guru of Warren Buffett, he said, stock markets are like voting machine in the short run, but these are like weighing machine in the long run. And that vote is nothing but the opinions of people. The weight is how the underlying economy and the companies perform, the kind of returns they generate on the capital invested. So if the companies continue to generate profits over a period of time, if the economy continues to grow over a period of time, the stock markets would typically follow. But in the short run, there is often no relation between what's happening in the economy and what's happening in the stock market. And this is precisely what we are seeing. 600 cases on 23rd March, Sensex at 25,000. 76 lakh cases now, Sensex at 40,000. You can't establish that 1:1 relationship in this short term. It's not possible. If that's the case, keep your long-term investments in stock markets. Don't put short-term money in stock markets, which means if you can afford to stay invested, and when can you afford to stay invested? Only if you have enough provision for your immediate short-term and medium-term needs. If you've done that, then don't worry, stay invested.
Fabulous, Amit, and it's a very, very detailed narrative, and every one of us need to look at our financial goals vis-a-vis our investments. What is meant for short term is the short term. What is meant for long term is long term. Don't club these two things, and then once you compartmentalize, there is nothing to worry about the biases, and you are sticking to your road, what you want to reach, and there could be some bump that could be delay, but we can. And here
this is another area, sir, where the behavioral finance principles are actually applied in practice. There is something called mental accounting. No, we put our money in mental boxes. No, can we convert it into real practice for our benefit? So first of all, each goal is a separate mental box. The time horizons are different mental boxes. So I don't keep don't invest in stock markets for short-term needs. So if I do that mental accounting, then again, I'm using the same behavioral finance principles to my advantage.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a fabulous myth. One nudge I have on this is I keep telling my friends and investors, colleagues, when I'm investing for my long-term goal, say my retirement or any long-term goal, the day I'm investing, that is the day I look at NAV of the mutual fund. That is a net asset value for me. And my goal is maybe 20, 30, 10 years down the line, till 2022, 2029, maybe next 9 years, there is that NAV for me is never available value. In 2029, I open my statement of account because my goal is 1 year away. Then I look at my statements, that is now available value for me. That is, I have 3 different NAV for it. It's,
beautiful.
It's like, there is a, we will just sum it up. This is a compliment for you, Kavita, is on your nuggets. The same question which you got on the marriage, Sukumar Kumar said, it is nice to talking about nuggets. Can we have all nuggets in one place to nourish in a later part of time? We can review and have emotional balance. As a speaker spoke about the nuggets written on the board in home. Thank you. I'm sure Amit will take this forward and he writes next book on the nuggets. And Amit is always good at writing. He writes a book a month kind of it. Some of us read a book a month. We'll read a book a month, but he will write a book a month. That's the difference. Amit, this question is not related anything to our business or the conversation, but the one of the participants has written. I thought if there is anything you can throw the light with your perspective. This is Himakshi. She mentioned, I am from events and exhibition business. Last 9 months, we have no work. What is the hope of vaccine announcement will improve market outlook and incentivize business to start investing in exhibitions and events? And we are going through the major insecurities for the business future and sustainability. Would you like to say something? It's of course out of context, but the anxiety somebody is going is very true. At Aditya Birla, from my team, we used to organize many of the programs on ground. Right. And most of the times we partner with many of the exhibitors across. And today, this year, we have hardly spent anything on that. with that, our engagement spend has come down by almost 80%. Today, and our reach has become double of it. It's we have reached more people with a lesser cost. But even after opening, how we can look at, I do not know. But I can have one context here. One of my known person associates earlier, he was having into this events and exhibitions, and the soon after things have become he is not very sure. He quickly moved and he converted entire thing into a digital company now. And most of the global events and the digital conferences he is handling, so that he stay hooked on the business. But any comments from you on this?
So there are a couple of things. So first of all, I can't comment on the vaccine. Yes, any vaccine announcement that in the recent past also, we've seen some of the stock prices, or in certain cases, the whole market's also moving up when there was some hope. But those all hopes sounded like false alarms. So to that extent, I'm not sure the next time when a vaccine is announced, whether how the markets would react is something that I can't comment on and would not like to comment on. But it's a difficult situation to be in right now for any events and exhibitions company or a business. Having said that, my sense is this video conferencing fatigue is also setting in. We are at the end of the day social animals. We would like to meet people physically and not only electronically. It's not very comfortable to be sitting at home and only staring at a screen. That's not comfortable. So my sense is the moment a little bit of normalcy is visible, some amount of movement may start. The only thing that may happen is, and that's what Kavita, the example of the World Trade Center attack of 2001. Now, what happened subsequently was, for some period, people were scared and they avoided traveling by air. But the airports, the entire aviation business, so to say, modified itself. And now we go through the screening that activity has only been enhanced. So somewhere I think our response as the global community is also likely to be that the formats of the event may change. There will be social distancing. There will be enough number of sanitizers available. Probably instead of entirely closed environments, we might have open format events. I don't know what would emerge, and somebody in the event and exhibitions business is actually far better placed than someone like me to visualize how to reshape the business. But my sense is, yeah, it may be a little painful for next some time, and I don't know how to define that sometime. But when things start moving up, we will see events and exhibitions coming back in a different format. Is my understanding.
Thanks, Amit. I think it's more reasonable. I also look at things.
Just to add to what Amit just said, right? I mean, Himakshi, I mean, you have to hang on. And the kind of feeling that you're feeling now, insecure, right? I think it's very natural.
Very natural.
As human beings, we will all feel insecure when it comes to uncertainty, right? In fact, I mean, if I were to just think about this whole, what we were talking about, perhaps financial planning is meant to give rewards to situations like this. So suppose somebody had, plan, even a little bit of planning in our life when it comes to finances might help us, kind of give us reward in uncertain times, right? So it's not too late to start, Himakshi.
Thank you, Kavita. I think, it's a needless to say all these things are, these conscious shocks makes us to think of our life. How do we need to live even during the good times? How you can plan so that in the bad times, it will come to you to help. Then again, things will settle down and you can get back. This is the same book, myself and Amit, we are reading about 100 years work life, where she writes about, she's a professor from London School of Economics. She says about, how you need to prepare for taking the pauses in the life, go back to the career which you like the most later. It's world is evolving very differently. And with this, I would like to sum it up. And before summing up, I would like to have one question to both of you. one for you on the emotional well-being and other for the financial well-being. And what is one lesson we can take away during these COVID times on the emotional well-being? Over to you, Kavita.
Okay, so I'll quote Adam Smith again. He wrote this in his book Money Game. He said that we are a bunch of emotions, prejudices, insecurities. It's all well as far as you know it, right? So having knowledge, or being aware of these kind of insecurities, I think that's the first stepping stone to feeling well, to being emotionally well.
Thank you so much. It was very apt and very appropriate to go back and revisit. And thank you so much, Kavita. And in fact, we enjoyed every part of the nudges which you shared. And my colleagues are sending WhatsApp message to me. I have not capitalized on grilling you so much to get the most from you. And I know there are 3 messages in my
I
WhatsApp.
agree as
And
well.
I have done an injustice to my profile to moderate. He said, one of my colleagues said, you should have asked more question to Dr. Kavita. Lot of things to come from her. And,
No. I think it's perfect balance.
and
I love to listen.
I look forward to invite you for an exclusive session, and I'll stay to my colleagues
Absolutely.
separately on that. Amit, on the financial well-being, you are an author and orchestrated many things. What is one lesson this COVID people can take away to ensure the financial well-being stay impacted, stay with us throughout? I never need to worry about the financial well-being. What is that one lesson I need to learn with COVID?
So I think it's very similar to what Kavita was also mentioning. Uh, Awareness. In awareness of what? Awareness of what I really want from life. How do I want to live the life? And the financial goals would come from there. The moment I've got my financial goals defined, then I work backwards and start the journey towards those goals. And at the same time, I also need to think of the scenarios what can go wrong. And those scenarios that can go wrong are the risks that we need to plan for. A lot of times, the bigger risk is not outside, the bigger risk is inside. We get swayed because of the power of the emotions, and that's where the power of what Kavita was mentioning comes out and beautifully explained. So if we are able to take care of those emotions, and how do you take care of the emotions? That's where she mentioned about the nudges. That's where she mentioned about being aware of the emotion, the power of emotions, and also the importance of emotions. That without emotions you can't take decisions. The moment we do that, that risk is taken care of. The financial risk is taken care of, and then financial well-being is something that nobody can stop.
Thank you so much, Amit. I think for financial well-being, it could be like we can't predict what is going to happen tomorrow in your life, but you can always prepare for it.
Absolutely.
And you can only prepare for anything when you are prepared internally well with your right emotions and you are managing yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think with this, I sincerely thank both of you for sharing your
so
wisdoms, wonderful nuggets. It was a lot to learn. I think 1 hour 30 minutes is much lesser to get the best from both of you. And I wish to have you both once again in length. We can have exclusive sessions. Look forward. Thank you so much once again. Thanks to ET Edge for making this initiative to work and come together to each one of you. I thank all the audience for staying hooked and wonderful questions. And I wish you all the good luck. This is a time of Navratri. It's the Navratri, as the Nava is also have a Sanskrit meaning, is also not only 9, but it is a new. Let this bring the newness to each one of us. And Ratri is a darkness, and there will be every darkness is followed by the light. And I'm sure after this, we have a light at the end of the tunnel. Only thing, we should have a new vision because we are living in the new normal. And this Navratri, again, symbolically, we pray 3 days to Goddess Lakshmi, 3 days to Goddess Saraswati, and 3 days to Goddess Durga. Similarly, in our financial life, our emotional life, you need to have that awareness where you need to Goddess Saraswati's blessings. And financial well-being is nothing but Goddess Lakshmi to stay with us. And emotions, which are, making us to be courageous in the down and be courteous when you are good. Both will come from Durga. And let Goddess Lakshmi, Durga, and Saraswati bless us with all that right knowledge, right wealth, and right emotions to take a right decisions. Wishing you all happy Navratri, happy festive times. And financial well-being, as I said in the beginning, it is not a state of well-being only measured by the wealth, but it is the quality of life you live. Wishing you all a wonderful life. And last but not least, don't forget the SIP. That SIP is not a systematic investment plan. Stay wisely, invest rightly, and plan smartly, and live prosperly. Let there be a prosperity everywhere, and create healthier and happier relation with money. God bless you all. Thank you so much for staying here. Wishing you all a wonderful time, happy festive time. And thanks to my panelists. I'm honored to be between both of them. And wishing you all the good luck. Thanks to ET, Vivek, and entire team, Karan. Thank you so much for this. And for some of you for great questions, thanks. And some of those questions which are coming, we could not answer, I'm sorry. And thanks for all that positive messages. Thanks, Vishal. Thanks, Avinash. Thanks, Vasant. Thanks, Sharda. Thanks, Manish. And thanks, Rohit, for all that wonderful messages. Wishing you all the good luck. I think Savita Ranganathan has come. The question is, thank you and very informative. Savita Ranganathan to Savita Ranganath, from Savita. Fantastic. Wow. And thank you so much. God bless you all and have a wonderful time. And I think we don't want to delay you for your lunch on a Friday afternoon. And thanks once again. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay blissful and stay wealthy. God bless.
Thank you so much. God bless. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will say bye then. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.